The Black Death. The Black Death, or the Plague, swept through Europe from 1348 to 1347 to 1351. So those 3 or 4 years were devastating to Europe. They lost 25 million people, which was about 25% of its entire population. The plague also upset economies. There was famine. There were not enough people to work, and so wages increased, interestingly, because there were not enough people to work. There were not enough people to produce food, so there was a famine. There were all different types of economic impacts. Jobs were plentiful in some ways, but there were no people to really work in those jobs. Culturally, social authority diluted. There was no real way to solve this problem, and so people became very mistrustful. And then religion, there was a great deal of alienation from the church because there was no real way to find a cure and to solve the problem. Prayers did not work, medicine did not work, and there was no real knowledge about the source of the disease, no treatments at the time. And so people either partied, prayed, or fled. If you could flee, you did, and those were the wealthy people. Many prayed, but to no avail, and then there were always those who would just try to party on through it. But unfortunately, that is not what happened, and you will find as you watch the films later just how devastating this particular plague was to Europe during the Middle Ages. So there are 2 different types or forms of the plague. There is the bubonic plague, which came from direct contact with fleas. And this is how the plague got to Europe, through fleas on rats, through a ship. And so what would happen was that the plague bacteria would multiply inside of the flea, and the bacteria would actually block the flea's stomach. So the flea became hungry. So the flea would bite into a host, typically a rat at that stage, but sometimes people, and feed continually because it couldn't get full. Because remember, the bacteria blocked its stomach. While it's feeding, then, the bacteria flows into the host at the site of the bite. The bacteria has a new host, moves on to that host, and the flea dies of starvation. And so now another host has the plague. The pneumonic plague was transferred from person to person when infective saliva was coughed up by people with the bubonic or another type of plague called septicemic plague, which was a little bit more rare. Symptoms of the Black Death for the bubonic plague: swelling of lymph nodes and armpits and groin that produced pus and blood. Acral necrosis. This skin would look black underneath. It would turn black because of subdermal hemorrhaging. It was actually blood, but it looked black, hence the Black Death. High fever, aching joints, nausea, vomiting. The victims died within 47 days, so very, very quickly, and there was a 75% mortality rate. So the chances were really good. If you got the bubonic plague, you would die. Those who got the pneumonic version, they would also have slimy and bloody sputum. So they would be spitting up slime and blood. And this particular type of plague had a 90% mortality rate. These and other visual arts were produced during the time to try to depict the sick. So you can see the places, the black spots on their arms, and the swelling of their lymph nodes. You can also see back here, this is a priest or a doctor, or maybe a combination, hoping for a cure, trying to work some magic here, but of course there was nothing that could be done. We know a lot about the Black Death because of a writer named Boccaccio and others who recorded their experiences. In his book, Boccaccio was Italian, and he wrote a piece called the Decameron. He records his experiences with the Black Death. Italy lost 2/3 of its population. So while all of Europe lost 25%, other countries were countries within Europe were definitely hit hard. And so 2/3 of the population of Italy. Boccaccio and his friends fled Florence to avoid the plague, and they told stories to pass the time. So this is how we get the Decameron. We also get other accounts. Petrarch wrote his famous sonnet series about his love, Laura, who died because of the plague. So the plague was it lasted only 3 or 4 years. I shouldn't say only, but it was a significant time and defined this culture in very important ways.